Welcome to Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw, and that would be your Chickashaw native, your Chickashaw Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And we have got the first English, I believe, American, British heavyweight champion, the only person to take off Ultimo Dragon's mask in Japan and Mexico. He is a stalwart down in Mexico himself, been in Europe. He is Mr. Sam Adonis. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm actually honored that you learned that much about me. It's incredible accolades. Sometimes it feels, surreal considering I was just a super fan as a kid anyway. But, I patterned myself a lot after someone like you, having that international career and going out there and learning the world before you actually try to settle down and find your roots in USA.
So you're the only American that had the first American that had the British heavyweight championship?
So yeah, this is Brian Dixon's British Heavyweight Championship. So this comes from All Star Wrestling. The guy that promoted Haystacks and Big Daddy and all that. I was the first American to actually win the title. This is the lineage, going back to Finley was a champion, Robbie Brookside was champion, Doug Williams, and I was the first American to have it. So it was a neat little thing. It's weird though because British wrestling had changed so much at that point. A lot of times that they were, going after what the American fans were doing. So the whole shtick, I kind of was the American in the British scene for All Star. So I didn't really, I wasn't exactly Johnny Saint out there. But, as far as the stories go and being a part of it and working with the British guys, it was truly an honor to have that position.
Yeah, but in fairness, nobody was Johnny Saint but Johnny Saint. I mean, that guy was awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, you're right.
So did you get to work with him a lot, Sam, or was he gone at the time you got to?
So Johnny Saint used to come every Wednesday nights in the summer to a city called Rill. And Rill has this, the Rill Town Hall has been having wrestling, I think 80 or 90 years, something. It's a second story building that has, it seats about 300, but it has a sweet balcony. And they've literally all wrestled there. Everybody in the British scene went through Rill Town Hall. And during the summers, every Wednesday they'd have the show, and Brian was there, and Johnny would come down. Guys like John Kenny would stop by. It was kind of like that place that everybody was familiar with. So it had this old reputation, and it was amazing because, it still had that prestigious crowd. They were into it, and they knew what good was. And I'm not talking like, smart American fans on the internet good. The crowd just appreciated what a good talent was. And it really felt special every time we were out there, even though there's only 300 people.
And what
I really find it amazing how the UK wrestling was over there. John's told me stories about, the caravans that the guys in the old days used to take and just park their caravan out in the parking lot for like 10 days and just make it like a carnival passing through town where you're there 10 days. You had to be very creative in your work. And then as a young guy, that's got to really help you develop your work because you got to change your matches up every night. And, you can't give them the same style of match. Did you find that it helped you? Was that the kind of the era that you came through too?
So it was invaluable because when it was actually my first stop after I was released from WWE in 2011. Regal became good friends with me, and he put me on to Brian Dixon and kind of made the connection. And I was amazed at how much more I learned in my first 6 months in England than I did in the year in WWE. Not disrespecting the program, but it was the amount of consistency, just having that volume of work. And I think that's something that, a lot of my peers are never blessed with, is the ability to wrestle every night of the week. In that time frame, you have to learn how to protect yourself and protect your opponent, change things up, be creative and kind of overcome adversity. And, when you wrestle in these 14-foot rings that are 40 years old, sometimes you don't have the luxury of the ropes. So you have to change it up. You're able to, adapt to anything that's thrown your way. And a very short period of time, in let's say 6 months time after I was released from WWE, my skill set had gone a whole another level because of that consistency that British wrestling got me.
It was also works the other way. They had a ring in Bremen that was probably 22 feet across or bigger. It had a 3-foot apron, so you couldn't take a bump out without hitting the apron. So you had to like take a bump over the top rope, hit the apron, make sure you hit it. You couldn't miss it. Then you take a bump to the floor. It was, and Jerry, you know how it was. You had 4 ropes down in Australia before, didn't you?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. New Zealand and Australia.
You don't realize how different it is until you see all these different rings, and it really is a complete different mindset when you get into these things.
Those 22-foot rings, though, with the big aprons on the St. Louis Old Kill Auditorium under Sam Adonis back when I was a kid breaking into business. You go up there and you're used to the 18 or 20-foot rings. All of a sudden, you get that extra 2 feet.
That's a
And
lot.
man, you're hitting that crisscross or something like that, man. You don't do many of them, man. You learn how to do other things real quick, And then,
Yeah.
like you say, you get backdrop over the top rope. You're expected to go down. All of a sudden, you're hitting that hard ass apron, and those aprons are hard because they're the solid part of the ring. Then you got to roll again. Then you get that hard part of the floor there, man. Yeah, those big rings were brutal back in the days, man. But they teach you how to work a little bit smarter, I think, anyway.
Hey, was the kill that as hard as they say, Jerry?
Oh yeah, it was the ring and the audience. The audience
I mean
was
mainly the ring because Agbar used to tell me he said only person tough enough to bump in that ring was Harley Race.
yeah. Well, Harley even he did honky tonk man a few times on there where he got one bump, and but he built that bump up, But you get those big ass guys like Moose Sholok and the guys like that who love to throw you into the turnbuckle, then run full bore across the ring. And Moose was so damn big, he'd lose his perception, because the ring was so big. By the time that second step would get there to crush you in the corner crusher, I mean he was hitting you full bore, full speed there. So yeah, guys, that was the biggest bitch. That was the only really bitch about St. Louis was the damn ring, and Sam was so damn cheap he had never modernized his damn rings or anything. But it was a learning experience like everything else when you're young there. But yeah, the ring was stuff there. So Sam, your dad was a promoter. What was it like in your house? Did you Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, right? Am I correct? Pittsburgh.
Correct. So
And so
I was
tell us a little
basically,
bit. Tell us a little about your dad promotion and your upbringing around professional wrestling.
so basically, I was born into the wrestling business just because my brother and dad had such a strong bond to pro wrestling. My dad grew up watching Bruno and was just obsessed as a kid. And then my brother was born WWE's Corey Graves, and they just bonded over wrestling. That was their time. I was born, and when I was, when I came into this world, we had all the wrestling figures, we had magazines, we had tapes, and it kind of became, my second nature. I didn't really ever pursue it. It was just there, and it's what I knew.
Yeah.
And the more that I understood, the more I needed to consume. So I was as a kid. I was born in '89, so by 91, 92, I'm starting to I want to learn, find more. But we had wrestling videos of wrestling's wildest matches from Memphis, or we had wrestling gold from the '60s, and there was never enough for me to consume. I always wanted more. So we would go to the video stores, we would rent videos, and I felt like there was something else out there I needed to see. And that led to me inevitably becoming a big tape trader and getting so interested in international wrestling. But my dad, basically, he was a volunteer fire chief up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Dominic DeNucci hooked him up with a fundraising company in 1992, I believe it was. So they would run these wrestling events at the fire hall, and I was just a kid. I didn't, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I wasn't by any means, I didn't understand kayfabe. I wasn't backstage, but it still consumed me. Fast forward a little bit, and my dad realized that he didn't need
So
to pay
there
these
was
people.
no way anybody was smarting you up back in those days because
No,
kayfabe was still
exactly,
pretty strong.
not at all. And my dad started doing the shows without the fundraiser. He started, he made friends with the wrestlers, and he realized that his shows were drawing better than the indie company's show was. So he started to do it his own. And when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, I was the one helping, book the shows. I was the bell keeper. I was
That's
hanging
amazing. Yeah.
posters. I did everything other than wrestle, which ultimately brought me to become a wrestler when I was 18.
Yeah.
And how often was he running?
Back at this point, it's probably once every 8 to 12 weeks. It wasn't very often. I feel weird saying it, an indie promoter, because back at that day, the independents that you think of, Joe Glidhart or Dennis Corluzzo that had 50 shows a year. My dad was, still just a spot show guy. But, for me as a young child, it was a lot to grow up around. It was cool. But eventually it got to the point about once a month. And my brother got to a level where he was pretty big in Pittsburgh. And we really, had some pretty good roots there.
Were you at the time, your dad starting to promote you, and was you in high school? Or was you a high school athlete? Was you athletic when you were growing up, or what
I wrestled when I was wrestled in middle school, 7th and 8th grade, but I absolutely hated it because it was too hard. It wasn't what I liked about wrestling.
Too hard.
So, right.
There were no ropes.
That's right.
Exactly. No, I couldn't come out to my fight with.
That's the thing. I coached high school wrestling for so long. And really, I mean, that was part of the fun. You watch these kids come in, that were pro wrestling fans. They come in, they look around. Where are the ropes? Hey, you walk into the wrong room. Well, what room is the ropes in? They're not here. But
I was actually a fat kid in high school. I graduated at 300 pounds.
Why, dear kid.
Yeah, so I was the biggest, nerdy tape trading guy you'd ever see. I was a neck beard through and through. And I was the guy that would have, fought day and night defending all these, independent stars. But then the more you learn, the better you grow. And I think I grew out of that phase.
Tell us about these few independent stars. Did any of them go to make it to the big leagues, or
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously my brother's one, but Brody Lee would come in all the time for my dad. He was a really good friend of ours. I mean, infinite guys. Chris Hero would be there. Claudio Castagnoli. Just the Northeast scene, we were friends with all of them, so they'd come through and they weren't necessarily my dad's guys, but, we were able to really become friends with them. And, CM Punk used to come to my parents' house and watch WWE pay-per-views because him and my brother were so tight. So, I definitely I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I was kind of spoon-fed a front row education.
And when did you decide to start that you wanted to be a wrestler?
I started training when I was 14, but nobody had any faith in me. Nobody. My parents didn't. My brother didn't. Everybody thought,
you were 300 pounder. You're a 300 pounder. Could you go a little bit, or at 300, or did you hinder you?
Believe it or not, I was very agile on the trampoline because I was such a fan for the Hayabusas and the Juice and Lagers. I used to just emulate what they did as a fat kid, which kind of taught me a pretty incredible body control. So when I started wrestling, even though I was fat, I was as a weirdly agile fat guy. And, it all kind of fell into the right places.
That's what Mr. Brisco says about me, a weirdly agile fat.
I'd leave out the agile part of it for sure.
Yeah, just weird fat guy. Just weird fat guy, that's all.
Brisco, by the way, Sam, have you seen the latest posting on X where John's imitating he was Americo Vampiro? His Mexican accent is awful, man. That's 101 Texan right there.
I was so unprepared. They just put me on a talk show. I had no idea what to talk about. I didn't understand anybody. There wasn't a translator, nothing. I'm just there. It was horrible.
He literally told me that story
thanks to Roy
about 2 weeks ago.
That damn guy put it on. He also
Thank you, Roy. You made my morning with that post.
It was great.
But you understand, got to get to Mexico. Sometimes they just put you out there, Sam, and there's not a lot of prep to it.
Sink or swim, yeah. It is. It's a
lot
of people.
I sank because I was a weird fat guy.
Yeah.
A lot of American wrestlers will tell you that Mexican wrestling can be lazy because a lot of it doesn't have structure. But when you finally pick up, if you're all on the same wavelengths, they're not going to call it all because they know there's no point in calling it all out there. But, there's so much artistry behind the way that those matches unfold. And, it's sink or swim. Sometimes you can go out there like, I have no idea what the hell's happening. This guy's drunk. This guy's not talking to me. Here we go. And the next thing you know, you're in front of 2,000 people losing their mind because everybody's just clicking and the timing's incredible. It's kind of an art form of its own. It's different to pro wrestling.
It is an art form of its own. I mean, that's the one thing, this, WWE has just either acquired or whatever the correct term is for AAA. But the thing is, the Mexicans want to have their culture and heritage intact. So it's not going to be like, WWE going down to Georgia Championship Wrestling and taking WWE down there. They want to see their culture and heritage. So it's a unique fit that they have there that's going to be kind of tough to navigate. But I'm sure they'll do a great job with it. But it's something that the Mexican people have a certain culture and heritage that they love, and it does make sense to them. And when you watch it, it
What
makes sense. It doesn't always to us. We look at it, it looks crazy, but to them, it's what they want. And if it's what they want, that's what they should get.
I was able to learn a lot about the psychology and the style of lucha just by watching some of the old El Santo movies. Because if you watch those movies, you can almost understand, like, in their opinion, it is very realistic. We see it as all this rolling and juking and jiving, but when you watch one of those old Santo films and see how it would play out in that scenario, it's so believable. And how it's like, oh, that's why it is this way. Obviously it's developed in a different direction. Some things are just kind of out of left field and there's a backflip for the sake of a backflip. But it definitely made me look at it a lot differently.
They had a Royal Rumble when I was down there, Jerry. You should have seen this. They had men go first, then they had women in the Royal Rumble. Then they had the little guys, the dwarfs, but they had big little guys and little guys. So they had they had like your Andre dwarfs, then you had like your little short dwarfs. And they were doing like the big man spot with each other, but it's all in the Royal Rumble together with the men and the women. Then
wow.
then some trans wrestlers came out, and so you've got like two or three trans. I'm sure you have got everything represented completely, and
And this is
and somehow
1991.
somehow I'm just sitting there watching it. It was very entertaining.
Wow, 1991. Wow, they were ahead of time on that. That's for sure. So Sam, you're independent wrestler there. What was the next move? How did you get noticed by WWE and get invited down to the training center?
So I just being there at this time, the consistency was is high, and I stayed in touch with Regal a lot. I moved back to Florida temporarily, and it was just time. He said, hey, we're going to invite you for the tryout. This was a tryout that actually brought. This is the one that Ricochet got signed in, and
Right.
Cash Wheeler from the Revival. He was in that one as well. Honestly, I was very confident with the tryout and the way it went. I kind of assumed I was going back and put the cart in front of the horse, and probably counted my chickens before they hatched, and it wasn't the right time. So I literally just got right back up, went back to England, kept wrestling there full time. And while I was there, I became really good friends with a guy named Adam Bridle, who's Angelico in AEW. Um, we just hit it off great, and he told me how well I would do in Mexico. And during the same time, a bunch of luchadors came over to England and would just stay and be on those same tours with us. And everybody said the same thing. I'm such a nerd for history, and just I have the dates, and I remember things. And you get some Mexican guy that doesn't speak English coming to England to meet an American that remembers or knows more about lucha than he does. It kind of was like, what
Wow.
the hell? This is weird. You should go to Mexico. You do well there. That eventually led to an invitation to Arena Mexico to train with CMLL, which is where everything kind of blew up from my perspective.
And Sam, before we get to that, go back just a little bit. So when you started training, was it Corey that first trained you?
Yep, my dad had a ring in a facility about 3 miles from our house. Corey was the main trainer, but again, I was a fat kid, but I lived at that training center. It was my sanctuary, and I would go there. I got an old tape or an old VCR and a TV and a weight bench, and we took it to the ring. And when I'm 16 years old, you know, I could either hang out at the house or I could be in this freezing cold room, watching wrestling tapes. But I would go do my own rolls. I would just take bumps just because it consumed me. I didn't want to be at the house. I'd rather be around a wrestling ring than be in a comfortable home in the middle of winter in Pittsburgh. So, that definitely helped my advantage. I was literally there 80% of the time. I was by myself, just rolling alone. And eventually, we would have other wrestlers. There was more students that came, and I was just around it. It obsessed me. There was never a day that I wanted to be a professional wrestler. It was always, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. It was already given. It was already in the cards. This was my, who I am. And I never, as I said before, everyone expected me to fail. They all said, Sam loves this shit. He's going to be a promoter. He's going to be a ref or something, but he's not going to be a wrestler. And now it's kind of funny to see all these same people because they're all, mind blown with what's happened.
What kind of support was you getting in your home? Was your dad all for it, or did he kind of say, the farm project gig is a pretty damn good gig for life? Did he ever try to talk you another way?
They never talked us out of it. They were awesome, so supportive of it. My dad loves this just as much as we do.
And your brother was right there. Your brother was right there, with the same passion that you had, obviously.
Yeah, but he was so much older and removed from me. He was 5 years older than me. So he didn't live in the house with me. He lived in a different town. So he would have to make Wednesday night training his priority. I was there 6 days a week, whether he could come or not. Every once in a while, he'd say, hey, can we do a Saturday morning session or whatever? But, it was my love. It was my sanctuary. And it was funny because at that age, I had a reputation in Pittsburgh amongst the wrestlers. They would all ask my opinion. They all would want to know my opinion in their match. And they would come to me for match references of who to watch, what's happening in Japan, what's going on in Mexico. And I would be brutally honest. I would say, that was bad. This is not good. And they get so mad at me. Oh, shut up. You're just some fat mark. You don't know what you're talking about. And then
they asked you.
And a month later, they'd ask me again. So it was, there was kind of something going on, and it definitely led to, it was an asset to my success, but it's definitely a funny backstory.
You mentioned Bruno. Did you have much interaction with Bruno or Larry Zbyszko or any of those guys like that?
I've met Larry 2 times. I met Bruno probably 5 times, but I was always under the age of 10. Was never really much spending time with him. It was just, I didn't quite understand like I do now. But, in our household, Bruno Sammartino was Superman. There was stories every day. And my dad, to this day, the saddest I've ever seen my dad was the day that Bruno Sammartino died. It's, it's really crazy to think about because it's like, literally, Superman's gone. And that's just one of those things in our house. Same thing with my brother. He knows all about it. We have more stories than most people. And it's really crazy how much he meant to my dad.
Another guy that you mentioned a little bit earlier that was a tremendous mentor to me while I spent my year down in Australia was Dominic DeNucci, a guy that really taught me and mentored me and really would take me, watch my matches and take me and set me down afterwards and explain to me what working was really about and everything. Were you fortunate enough to be under that tree with Dominic, Eddie?
Yes. Dominic actually became a really good friend of mine later in his life. When I was 19, Dominic was, I think, 68, and I wrestled him in a singles match.
Wow.
It was, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life because Dominic was still Dominic. To learn that single match at 19 changed my perspective more than anything I could have ever hoped for. Because to see how
what were you thinking? I mean, how did it change your perspective? What was your perspective?
Less is more. Less is more. And if you can hear that, you can hear that a million times. And they preached it to us at FCW. And until you actually feel what it means,
right?
And that's such a drastic, a 68-year-old man against a 19-year-old man, and to make that work, and it didn't just work. The place was
at nuts, that point. Dominic's only going to do what's necessary to build a match, but he's going to do all those ingredients.
And to see it firsthand. Again, you could watch the match as a wrestler and not quite get it, but to be in there and feel it. It was mind blowing, and it basically changed my perspective. Wow, that was easy. I enjoyed that more than having to remember and be nervous. So it helped me so much, and again, that was a very proactive lesson at a young age. And from then on, I think I kind of worried more about the crowd and how to entertain and get the people wild from a situation, something like that.
So, what was the progression from training to into the ring? What age were you when you first started having actual matches?
In Pennsylvania, the state, the legal limit is 18. So I trained for about, I would say, a year and a half, and I could have debuted in West Virginia for probably 3 or 4 months before I did, because they don't have a commission. But because my dad was a promoter, I wanted it to be a pretty decent show. So I waited, and I was terrible. I was just a fat baby face, and
Hey, you keep
wanted to
saying,
be something.
how much did you weigh, Sam? You keep saying you were fat. I mean, I can't even picture you being fat.
My first match would have been, I was probably about 270 when I lost a little weight, but I was still very big.
270. Holy cow.
Yeah, but
you were JBL size.
JBL, and this, if you close your ears real quick, John, JBL was one of my favorites to watch because he wasn't the Ultimate Warrior.
Because he was fat.
What do you mean he was fat?
You gave a kid from Pittsburgh some hope, so take it. But
I'm glad I give all you fat kids out there hope.
It was and Dusty as well. Obviously these were the guys that we gravitated to.
Dusty was heavy. Dusty wasn't fat. Dusty was heavy.
Wait a minute. Dusty was heavy and I was fat?
Yeah, that's it. You said it.
These were the guys that made me feel like it was okay. And same with Adrian Adonis was another one. Loved him.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm fucking with Dusty and Adrian Adonis.
You're right there with those guys, Doc.
You heard it with me. You heard me with it.
Do I got the tomato stain on my belly too, like Dusty does?
That was a purple shade. That was a tomato, man. What fruit is purple? Not cantaloupe. They're yellow. What is it? Turnip.
Yeah.
Turnip. Yeah, turnip color there. Yeah, that's how heavy we knew Dusty was. We'd all look at his birthmark and see if he'd grown it. If he'd grown, you gave that 2 pounds, Dusty. So anyway, I'm sorry, Sam. We get off the subject here.
No, that's all right. I'd rather talk about Dusty Rhodes than myself. I swear.
Especially when we can poke fun at John Layfield,
Well, Dusty was actually in FCW when I was there. I wasn't able to get his time. I was one of the very bottom level new guys. And, you remember those guys would wait 5 or 6 hours just to get a meeting with Dusty, and exactly. I wasn't quite there yet. I was lucky to be there, and it never happened. It never materialized. I, to this day, believe that if I'd have been able to speak with Dusty and he understood who I was as a person, and to understand that I was the only guy in that room that he was preaching to who knew who Moose Sholak was. I watched Dick Murdoch matches as a kid. I feel like had we been on the same page of, okay, this guy understands where my references come from, maybe we can do something. But, unfortunately, the timing wasn't right.
You weren't fat at that time. When did the weight start coming off of you, Sam? When did you realize that, it's a visual product here? I got to look the part too.
It was about 19 years old, about a year after I started to be fair, it's when I turned heel, when I bleached my hair for the first time, and I was like just a laughable idiot, and really knew
you didn't go as a Texan. When you're a laughable idiot, you wasn't a Texan, were you?
Gosh, they just keep coming, don't they? So
it's the worst show ever.
You just get abused. I think he's bullying you. He's fought some points.
You're the one that brought up Adrian Adonis.
When I dyed my hair, I ended up when I started doing heel work and really, I found out I had a way to move the crowd. I was an extrovert. I knew how to learn some timing and get things right, and I kind of got some confidence. I said, you know what? I think I can be good at this. So I started losing the weight. I started caring. I started dieting. I was on treadmill every morning, and just I lost about 60 pounds. So I ended up getting down, to when I was never shredded. I was never like the abs or anything like that. But
neither was John.
I'm sure they're somewhere.
Me and Adrian.
You're in good company, man. That's who else? I'd rather be associated with Adrian Adonis than most people.
Adrian was a fantastic worker. I knew.
We're not talking about his work. We're talking about his fat ass.
Well, he was skinny when I knew him too, but he got a little heavy. Yeah.
Unbelievable. He was so good.
So you lost down to what, about 230 then, or something like that?
Yeah, about 230. And
were you hitting the weights? Were you thinking conscious about the weight training too? What
yeah. So I got into it, but it's never. I've never had the time or the money to do it the way that it could have been done. I wish. I kind of. My parents are the best people on earth. I'm so grateful for my two loving parents, and they're awesome. But they were too loose with us with diet. I see some kids, my brother with his kids, they make sure they eat pretty healthy most of the time. And now it's like I had the best childhood full of snacks and memories and fast food and anything you want, But now, I look back at it and be like, I wish that my parents kept me in shape. I wish they would have been a little more strict, because there's some people now that their idea of becoming a TV wrestling superstar starts in the gym. I never had that outlook. I was so obsessed with what was happening on the screen and learning the product that the gym has always been the second part to it. I've definitely developed much more interest in it over the time. I do. I love working out now, and I keep a decent standard, but it's at the time it was just consumption of wrestling. I need more. I need more. I need more. Which again, the grass is always green on the other side. My interest and love for the business has taken me the journey it has, and I've done a lot more than a lot of guys have, just based on their athletic ability. I've been able to have success in Europe, Mexico, Japan, everywhere in between, and it's because of the knowledge. The one thing that's helped me so much is the connections I make with people. Rob Brookside being one of them. When you can have a conversation with somebody that understands these deep cut references you're making, they know that you're not bullshitting them. They know that you're not, you're the real deal, because you cannot lie about facts or history. So when Rob Brookside and I were talking about British wrestling from the 70s, it's going to strike a chord and say, man, this kid really loves this shit. I should get him to Germany. He got me to Germany. My talks with Negro Casas in Mexico while I was doing independence is the one that made me get my push in CMLL. These people hear it and they can tell the wrestlers have a million people trying to bullshit them all the time. They can find the one that sticks out and isn't trying to bullshit them. And, I can luckily say that I've made a few friends that way.
Sam, when you're looking at history now, because me and Mr. Brisco love going through history, we're always looking at something, and most of our shows are about history. What are your resources?
You said him earlier. Roy Lucier is the best person to ever know.
No, he's not. I hate him now because he put out that Van Gerald. He put out that Van Gerald thing.
He has a Rolodex of tape traders and friends and uploaders and whatnot. So to me, wrestling to this day is like ice cream. It's what flavor, what toppings, why, when, and where. I can be on a 2-week spree of watching, Brazilian wrestling from the 80s, or I might want to watch, 90s Ultimo Dragon. I might want to watch, Mid-South, or I'm watching, Otto Von's CWA. I always kind of bounce around and see what I want. Roy, I can just say, hey, can you find me footage of this guy? And he'll go through the contacts and send me videos and links. And I mean, that's where I consume most of it, mostly YouTube. But the sad thing is, if it's not on YouTube, so much stuff's hard to find now. There's so much out there that's lost to history, because think about how many tapes there were. People that had millions of hours of footage on tapes. And unless those individual tapes were put on YouTube, they're gone. They're not coming back.
Yeah, but it's amazing because you're starting to see some stuff still surface, which is kind of crazy because it's, 40 years old, a lot of it. But, you just had a match surface from the 1900s, early 1900s from Australia. It was Hackenschmidt, right. Whoever it was down there. That was a really old tape. And all of a sudden, I don't know how something can be lost for that long and all of a sudden come up. There you go right there.
And these have been in my attic for 40 years. I'm dying. Right. Ric Flair. I mean, that is Ric Flair. I don't even know what this is about, but Ric Flair's name is on there. I can't wait to find my DVR and to watch it. I would be going through my shed, Sam, and I got boxes and boxes and boxes.
You still have a DVR?
So, yeah, somewhere. So I wasn't. I was a fan while I was wrestling. So I get your passion for looking at these old tapes. And
so when you get a guy like Roy Lucier, he literally makes these connections online, and someone will say to him, "Hey, I have 600 tapes, and I'm going to get rid of them. You can have them. All you got to do is come get them." And Roy will drive across the country to pick up the tapes because he thinks there might be there's hidden gems in there that aren't out there now, and they're exactly what they are. So you might have gold in your hand right there, but you got to find someone like a Roy.
The thing about Roy is it's crazy because Roy, I don't know how he has enough time. He looks through all those tapes. Yeah. He'll look through them and catalog them and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know how he has time.
He has one of these machines where you just pop the tape in and it uploads while you're not there. And then, so he does it. I've been to his house and he'll just upload every 2 hours. He's popping a tape in the VCR every 2 hours. And then when he has, a couple hours, he'll sit down and just zoom through the YouTube, the file online. So he's able to abridge a little bit, but it's just the fact that someone's still, again, that's the love of the business. To me, a pet peeve of mine, you hear everybody on this planet will tell you, "Oh, I love the business." But there's very few that actually love the business, because loving the business is different to loving, the scene that you're in or loving the attention you get. Loving the business is, doing right by the business and caring for it, trying to uplift it. And, there's fans out there that love the business more than some of the wrestlers, because, some people that really claim they love this business exploit it. And, sometimes I wish I was that guy. I wish I would have, been the hard ass a few times and, stuck up for myself and done what was best for me and not, see when I was being taken advantage of by a promoter. But again, sometimes that love for the business can be kind of a toxic love.
So not to divert from the topic, but one more thing on Roy. What is he going to do with all this stuff? I mean, he has a repository of tapes, and I guess they're not tapes or videos, whatever you want to call them. That's got to be unparalleled. What is he going to do with it?
So he throws the actual videos out when they're done. He keeps like the official ones that were the master, like a store-bought tape or something, or the original masters. But once he gets a tape, he copies it online and it goes to the garbage. But he has just files and files and hard drives of it. So I mean, it'll be around, but it depends. One day, I don't think he owns much of any of it as far as the rights go. So it's there, and I think if somebody wants to buy the hard drives or keep it safe, they can. But I don't know if there's an end game. He just does it because he loves it.
Wow. And it's just like, you never know what magic got it there. Just like that tape that surfaced, almost 100 years old with Lotus on it not long ago, defending the title or going for the title over in Europe somewhere. And somebody had that in the basement, just like all these tapes I got over here. I mean, I've been collecting. I'm like everybody else. I collected those tapes. People said to me, a lot of people watch them, throw them away. I keep them, I put them in a box, and I'm finding all those damn boxes now, and I love it. I can't wait, because you never know what hidden gem. I got a lot of old Florida. There was something that had never been out, is that Dusty Rhodes when he turned babyface at night that the American Dream was created, and the Armory here in Tampa. I know I have that tape around here somewhere. That thing had never been seen, right. So I know I got it hidden in one of my collections here somewhere. So I can't wait to find it.
It's out there. There's estates all over this country. Somebody's grandma has a box upstairs that her ex-husband gave her. They're there. Yeah. And only time will tell.
Jerry got it from his ex-husband too.
Why? Thanks,
so
John.
Dr. Tom Pritchard always said to us, which was cool, and that's one of my quotes I take all the time, is it's new never goes out of style. And that was always exciting to me. And that it applies to this, because even though it's old footage, or even though it's from the past, it's still new footage. So there's always going to be people looking for it.
Hey, Jerry, why do you have it? I mean, what do you have? What do you have it on? Do you have it recorded off the TV show? Do you have the original tape? What do you have?
I got tapes, I like VCR or DVR, whatever they're called. I can't even remember they're called. I got probably a dozen reels of the actual Armory footage. And the thing about what's so unique about the Armory is they're not complete matches, which upset me sometimes. But there's snippets of the matches, there's spots and everything. So when they would go on air, they would cut out the highlights that they wanted to show, of course, and that's basically what I got is the clips that come out of the Armory that was shown on TV. Well, let's take you back to the Armory last night. Here's a 2-minute segment of Jack Brisco and Dory Funk Jr. or something like that. So that's basically what got the highlights of it. I don't
And
have
so,
a
and you
lot of
think you
complete
have
matches.
somewhere the footage of Dusty turning babyface?
I know I got it somewhere because I remember keeping
Wow,
that because it was such a big deal. When it happened, I recorded it myself, so I
that's
know I got it
huge.
here. Yeah,
Roy will drive from Sacramento to pick that tape up to get it online for you.
yeah, yeah. I know. Well, Roy and I are in touch all the time. Yeah, I'm the one that inspired him to find that Layfield material.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I hate Roy.
He's always good for information too, because
Yeah, he
I'm
is.
crazy. I can be sitting on an airplane thinking, and I'm wondering who was the booker in Portland in 1968 or whatever. If I text Roy, and the other one is Fumi Saito in Japan helps me a lot with this about Japanese things. I'll text them, and if they don't know, they'll find out within about 30 minutes. And it's almost
Yeah,
like having a added app on your phone because they just
yeah,
know who to ask, and it's great.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm going to cancel my app
You can't, John.
to get rid of that Vampiro tape he just put out. So, Sam, when you ended up going down to Mexico the first time, what was you said you were in Europe, and that's when you first made the connection to go to Mexico the first time. What did you know about Mexico, and when you got down there, what did you think about it when you got there?
Hey, could
What
you
I knew
speak
about
Mexican like Layfield?
I
I spoke no Spanish. I knew a lot about lucha from a watch from a fan's perspective. I knew all the boys, all the masks. I knew who did what where. I knew the difference between AAA and CMLL. I would say I know more than most casual fans. And I got there and I knew no Spanish and I knew that it was difficult. Joaquin Wild from WWE now, he had wrestled there a few times prior to that. He's always been one of my best friends. He told me, he said, "Hey man, I don't know if Mexico is going to be for you. Like, I don't think you understand how hard this training is." And I was like, "I appreciate that. Thank you. But I'm going to go, and I think he was really looking out because I wasn't in the best shape at the time, but this was something completely out of my depth. And I went and it just all kind of happened so fast. The training was so ridiculously intense. And the CMLL training, I think you could hand pick the best athletes from every sport on earth and put them in that CMLL training class, and they're going to say, "Jesus, this is a workout." It's
Sam,
next level
I'm a
insanity.
little confused here. Help me. You said the training and in these classes. When you went down, did they just reacclimate you to different style of working? Did you have to go get into these classes to advance there? Or what? When you say these classes were overwhelming, tell us a little bit about that.
CMLL is basically run like a professional sports team. They have their minor league system. They have their the small arenas. They have probably 200 wrestlers that work with CMLL that are not on TV. They're not on any of the big shows. They're just the training level, and you have to basically
Sort of like a
level up.
Japanese dojo system, then, is what you're saying.
Kind of, but there's levels. You have to level up. You have to be the best. You have to perform the best in the class to level up to the next class, and then you level up to the next class, and then you level up to the next class. By the time you get to the fourth class, that's when you are just about to start getting on shows and starting to be taken seriously as like a nationwide luchador. A lot of the lower class guys, they're not signed to CMLO. They're not contracted or anything. They're just guys happy to be in the system. Um, when I got there, I was very lucky because I had already had WWE on my resume. They knew I was the real deal. I've wrestled all over the place. So I got there, and that gave me a competitive edge, if you will. So I got to go straight to the top class, which was Ultimo Guerrero and Shocker would run it. But each week, the top stars in the company had to come to class. And if you start skipping going to class and you start, your training isn't up to par, you get knocked back down or they'll pull you off the shows. So it really is like a competition system the whole time. The incentive obviously being 8 or 9 matches a week, getting paid full time and doing it. But if you're not performing at practice, you're not getting anywhere. But you had to learn the Mexican basics, the lucha basics, which the roles and the working on the opposite side. They're just again basics, but there's an entire different world full of basics of Mexican lucha libre that most Americans will never even realize is there. So I had to, come in and pick all that up. Luckily, I had already been a wrestler for, I think, 7 years at the time. And it came to me easily because I'd watched so much of it. I've seen a million years worth of this lucha and know when to turn and how to do things. So it kind of took them by surprise. Who the hell is this big American dude that knows he's this agile and he knows what we're doing? Let's give him a shot. So they pulled me in the office one day and said, hey, we have a pay-per-view coming up. We need an American representative, and we were thinking about getting you a visa and making you a full-time wrestler. I said, hell to the yeah.
And before that, you had no visa. You were just down there. Were you getting paid?
So no, my first, I was only going to go down for 2 months. Or no, 2 weeks. It was supposed to be 2 weeks. I was Brian Dixon's heavyweight champion at the time, and I was going to go down to rehab before a summer tour of the UK, where I was supposed to go do for it was going to be 6 weeks over there. And that 2 weeks turned into a month. And then within the 6th week, I already had the offer from CMLL. So I had to, gracefully bow out. And Brian totally understood because his money wasn't, anything earth shattering at the time, so he totally understood that I had to take this opportunity in Mexico. But my first 6 weeks there was just training at CMLL, but also in other lucha arenas and other schools. But I was doing independence, which was, not very good money at all. But I knew it was never a long-term thing. So it was just kind of to get the experience. And then it was one of those gambles that paid off because it was never my intention to spend any amount of length there, let alone 2 years.
And where were you living?
In Florida.
No. But when you're down in Mexico, when you went down there to train, were you staying in a hotel? Were you in an apartment? Did they set you up somewhere?
There's a friend of mine, just through one of the guys I met in the UK. He had one of the wrestling promoters he had an Airbnb at the time, but he rented it out to wrestlers all the time. So it was, hey, I'm staying another week. Oh, hey, I'm staying another week. And next thing you know, I ended up staying there for about 4 months. And then I ended up with a girlfriend I lived with for about a year and a half.
And then once you got the visa and everything, that's when they just put you straight away on the card, and that's when you're a full-time luchador?
Yep. I was one of very few people, and I was pretty proud of it because the way their system works, Friday night Arena Mexico is the A show. And, the B show is still, a couple further down than a B show. It's a pretty drastic difference. You're talking between, 8 to 20,000 people on a Wednesday night or on a Friday night. So it's a big deal. When they told me that, I still had to wait about 2 weeks and kept training, and I didn't know what was happening. I wasn't getting any answers because I couldn't speak any English or Spanish. So all of a sudden, I got a text message, and it's this Friday night, main event. I was front and center on the page. They made a big deal about their new debut, Sam Adonis. It was me, and then the Gorillas of Destiny, Tamatonga and Tongaloa against Atlantis, Diamante Azul, and Volador. Friday night main event. It was really, really cool. They made a big deal out of it, and things got hot pretty quick, but they died off, and then they got really hot.
And when did you start doing the Trump gimmick?
That's when things were getting crazy. That pay-per-view we did, I just ended up getting his face airbrushed on my leg. I did like a Rick Rude style.
Now for those that are listening, this was when Trump was president the first time, right?
No.
Well, so this was before. This is when he was running for president. This was June of 2016.
Gotcha.
I had my red, white, and blue American style Rick Rude tights. And I was just thinking of things to put on. So I had the dollar bill. I had the Statue of Liberty. And I said, I should put Trump's face on. That'll be funny. Because he was real controversial at the time in Mexico, too.
At the time?
I put it on my tights.
At the time, yeah.
Well, I put it on my tights, and I couldn't believe. To me, it was tongue-in-cheek. Like, it's kind of silly. But the reaction was just like, oh, my God, that's nuts. That's so funny. The people were getting mad at it. It was just, there was something there. And I kind of like, kind of put it on the back burner and was going to revisit it. When he finally won the presidency, that's when I said, you know what? I'm getting an American flag with his face on it. And I was just thinking straight up Iron Sheik, come out and raise hell. And I mean, it took me to levels I couldn't even imagine just because of the amount of international media and press it brought.
I
Well, it
was
looks like you still got the hairstyle of Donald Trump there growing up. Yeah.
Normally I put some gel in it, but I'm out of gel right now. So
I was in Scotland. I was in Scotland for I think for WWE, and when Trump got elected, and you went to bed, and I remember thinking these polls are a little bit. The count is coming in a little bit skewed from what the polls were. I thought he has a chance of winning this thing, and I woke up in the morning, of course, and he's won it. And I go to the Glasgow airport, then I go to the Heathrow airport. It is like there has been an attack on the world. People are walking into walls. I walk into a little store. Somebody they had a TV up on the thing and had Donald Trump president, and some guy sitting there goes, "Turn that fucking thing off." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this guy's got heat." It was unbelievable. I've never seen because I flew all through Europe to get back the day after Trump got elected. I've never seen anything like it. Everybody was just like, "What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It was wild. It was a wild time.
I had lived in the UK for the 4 years prior to that. So like I didn't I was more I probably knew more about British politics than American politics at the time. I just, I didn't care one way or the other. But again, being a nerdy wrestling mind, what's topical, what's going to work. And I knew that, that stuff was so hot in Mexico. And the funny thing is Brian Dixon always insisted on us having flags. The baby faces came out with British flags. The heels had American flags or pirate flags or whatever. It was just, and we kind of thought it was like, Jesus, Brian, I don't want to do the flag. It doesn't go with my gimmick. That's not who I am. But in a weird way, if you come out to the ring with a flag every night of the week, you start developing a style and what to do, and you learn how to work a flag. Right. In a weird way, that was almost something that I didn't know I was going to be able to capitalize on. Because when I got the flag in Mexico, that's when shit hit the fan.
Yeah. And that's when you got tons and tons of heat over the Trump gimmick, right?
Oh yes, it was primarily good heat. Primarily in Mexico, it was all good heat. Mexico loved it.
Well, you were getting mainstream TV, as a wrestler down there, and that's unusual, isn't it, for them?
I was getting mainstream TV all over the world. If you
over
find
the world,
out,
it's wow.
So Reuters came to it was NPR. NPR came to Arena Mexico to do a story about Mark Jindrak because he had been in Mexico for about 10 years. And I had come out with the Trump flag. And this guy basically shifted his focus. And sorry, Mark, he's a good friend of mine. But he shifted his focus and they did this article. And I thought nothing of it. I'm pretty sure at the time I didn't even know what the hell NPR was. National Public Radio. What's that? Whatever. Okay, cool. I'll do interviews with anybody that has credentials. So he did it. And then about 5 days later, it comes out. He sends it to me. I said, okay, cool. And then next thing you know, like 3 days later, every person I know is hitting me up about this interview. And wow. I got Vice, Reuters, NPR, Russia Today, Al Jazeera. These people flew to Mexico, to my house, and we do interviews either at a cafe or in my living room. There's a picture that I remember doing it in media. It was in the media room of CMLL. And I was in the corner of the room. There was easily 30 cameras, whether it's videographers or cameramen, just taking pictures. It was absolutely insane. And it actually got me a lot of heat with the boys because I was the new guy, and I got in there and everyone's like, what the hell is this? Why is this guy getting all this attention? Who is he? What's he doing? And it definitely, had plenty of adverse effects, but, at the time it was excellent. And it did, raise my level a lot as far as, public opinion. And it eventually led to some big money drawing feuds.
Well, CMLL had to be going nuts over the publicity that you were bringing them. They had to really look at this guy. Well, we got a real winner here. We can go all the way with this kid. Is that how it worked?
Exactly. They knew what good heat was. It taught me a lot too, because I was under the impression that working in Mexico means get your shit in, do as much as you can. And that's what I wanted to do because, every week we're doing all these drills and I'm doing, springboard moonsaults and stuff that nobody on my side has ever done. And I want to get it in and be seen and say, hey guys, look how good I am. But then, I started getting in these programs with Blue Panther and Negro Casas, and they say, hey, no, that move, don't do it. Don't do it anymore. Yeah. Nope. Hey, stop. You're the heel. Don't do that. And it got to the point where, I punch a kick and wave a flag. Excellent. I got the heat. And, it was incredible because we drew money, and and there's not many guys that are independent wrestlers in 2025 that can say they've actually drawn money anywhere. It's the system has changed to that point where it's not really, it doesn't work that way that much anymore. But we were hot. Panther, myself, and Negro Casas, our feuds, where we went, the crowd came, and we did the entire country. We went all over these different arenas, and it went very well. The adverse effect of that is my career outside of Mexico never really took off, because American fans, being as critical as they are, they latch to the stuff that looks good on a video. And I'll be the first to tell you, if you were watching those matches at the time, there's nothing about me that makes you want to come watch me. You don't want to see me against Jushin Liger. You don't want to see that match because I'm just going to punch and kick. Meanwhile, the bosses at CMLL are telling you, man, this guy's excellent. He gets his role. He's working. He's doing it right. He did everything right. But in the way the modern world works, as far as, you got to get over on the internet, that wasn't my priority, because I was actually getting paid to get over in the audience. And that's where I think the disconnect is why I haven't had more of a career in the United States.
What was it about Mexico? Because you had some guys go down there that, and not random, they're all talented guys that become huge stars. Jindrak goes down there. Now, obviously, Jindrak's a freak athlete, great, really good looking guy, terrific body. I get all of that. He goes down there, all of a sudden, he becomes this massive soap opera star. Vampiro goes down there, a Canadian, comes down there and becomes one of the biggest draws, literally, of all time. What was it about that some guys that got down to Mexico? Because you didn't see what I'm getting at is you had a few guys go down there and become huge, but you didn't have a bunch of guys go down there and become kind of big. It was either or. It was either guys become really big or guys didn't stay.
I think, in my opinion, or from my perspective, I think it's just, we're the small percent that were at the right place at the right time when there was money to be made. And I think that's what it comes down to, because if you're there, there's almost no incentive for wrestlers to be there unless you're in a top spot. And there's only so many top spots available. When Vampiro was there, why did you need another top babyface foreigner? You don't. So that, the demand is very one-sided. Again, I would not be there if it wasn't for the money. And that's a major, major misconception about, that even the American wrestlers have, that there's a lot of money in Mexico. It's all just being paid to the top guys. So if you're on top of CMLL or AAA, we get sent all over the country at top dollar. The other 95% of the show is working for $10, but it's very lucrative down there if you're in that position. But to incentivize it for anybody to move to a country that they don't speak the language of for just a maybe, I don't think I blame anybody for not sticking around. It's just a time and place, and a lot of stars aligning, I think.
And what do you think about the future of either AAA or CMLL as far as, especially in the Southwest? We have a huge, and I think undercounted population, Latino population. I think it's actually bigger than what we think, because I grew up in that area. I mean, I know it. It's, you have a lot of people that aren't documented, and I understand the political stuff of this, but you have, I think, a bigger percentage than what we count. But there's a demand there that people want their TV, their wrestling, their culture, their heritage. They like the WWE. They like what's going on in the rest of North America, but they still want their lucha. What do you think is the future of, say, TV contracts from Mexico to, like, say, the Southwest United States, the United States, or as far as the partnerships that could happen?
I would say that there's probably been nothing that has frustrated more in the last 5 years than the lack of effort and attention that could be put towards the lucha market in the United States. I think lucha libre in general is a virtual copy and clone of, like, the Marvel Universe brands. There's so much you can do with toys and masks. There's so much that could be, but at the end of the day, the Mexican population in the United States, they know the name Arena Mexico. They know Lucha Libre AAA. And the fact that we haven't been on TV in the United States for 5 or 6 years is mind-blowing, because this product is so insanely hot in Mexico. The same way WWE is in the United States, AAA, any town they go to is going to sell out based on the name alone. And everywhere I go, I could be in anywhere in Mexico or in Texas, or any Mexican you meet. There's not one Mexican American that does not know what Lucha Libre AAA is. That's just the way it is. Same way as you say, people know what WWE is. Same way with Lucha Libre AAA. And they've just left so much on the table. I personally I would have, I said, give me some responsibility. Let me help. Can we run more? Can we do this? Because there's a market here. There's so much, especially now with Lucha Libre as a whole. I think it's kind of becoming accepted more as like a cultural art form. I think it appeals to some people other than wrestling fans. I think that the artistic side of it makes people want to see it. I just think it should be, could be, and will be very big here in the United States eventually.
Yeah, and they're running the first show, I guess, what, June 7th or something like that in LA? They're
June
running
7th. Yep. It's gonna be When Worlds Collide at the that's NXT and AAA together. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with this. Hopefully I'll be involved. I still have to talk to the right people and see what happens, but that it's going to be huge. I think AAA now. I heard something about rebranding today. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to get rid of the name or just in association with. But in my opinion, the acquisition is the most valuable thing about it is the name Lucha Libre AAA because
I agree.
With that there's sentiments involved. So we'll see what happens. I'm definitely curious. It's making things exciting.
Yeah, it is making things exciting, and it's something that people have wanted for a long time. It's just tough when you make an acquisition to leave that acquisition in the form that it is. You so want to change it to make it into something else. It's but these are smart guys on both sides, and
very very smart guys. I'm curious to see how it's going to go. That's Lucha itself is just very very hard to understand. It's there's very few ways to explain it if you don't have that. All I would hope is that that whether the same people are in charge or comparable people are in charge, I worry that I would like to make sure that somebody that gets it is in charge. It would be hard to see if somebody doesn't understand the way the Mexicans think and try to repackage it, because I think like you said, the Mexican people are very proud of their heritage and it is what it is. I don't think they would accept too much change.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing, working down in Mexico and working in Japan and working in North America, especially the United States, because so many people don't realize, there's a really good connection there. That if you hadn't worked in all three, you don't really understand. Because there is a great connection with Mexico and the Japanese wrestling, a terrific connection that a lot of people don't understand if you're just working from the United States to Japan. Who was it you worked with in Japan?
I worked for All Japan. I did 4 tours with All Japan. But that all came because of my relationship with Ultimo Dragon. I had a separate feud in Mexico with Ultimo Dragon for his shows. He knew my value. He knew how to sell me and, use me. And I shit you not, he was my favorite wrestler when I was 6 years old. Like that's the number one. Wow. So, obviously I was excited to work with him. And we did a match in Arena, Mexico. It was me and 2 other Mexicans against Ultimo Dragon, and he had Jun Akiyama on his side. And I was all excited. I was a big All Japan fan. So I wrestled with Akiyama. And the next day they said, hey, would you like to come to Japan? So, it took 10 years to get there, but, being in that position with those professionals and like you said, being on the same page about things, understanding that when they're all kind of looking for the same thing, they know what an audience mover is going to be an audience mover. So it took me there. It took me a while, but I ended up having a lot of success very fast in Japan as well.
Yeah. And Sam, what are you doing now? Is AAA your main focus? Is that what you're going to be focused on the next several years?
Well, I don't know what AAA has been my main priority for the last 5 years, but I'm not contracted to them, so I don't know what's going to happen. I'm excited to see. There's been a lot of cool stuff happening, but my value is in Mexico. I hate to say it, but I can get recognized in public on the streets in Mexico. People want autographs, pictures at the airport. So I think there's something in the Spanish market that's, calling my name. I don't know what it is or who it's with, but, I'm bilingual. I'm conversationally fluent in Spanish. So there's something there. I don't know what to pursue. I've had a really good career thus far. I always have to think and go after the best opportunity. It's been great for me for the last few years to just, as an independent. A lot of people say, how are you surviving unsigned? It's like there's money in Mexico. There's a lot of money in Mexico, but I don't know if with the change of ownership, if I'm involved in that or not. But even so, I can still stay busy in Mexico. I don't know. I think I'm ready to pursue opportunities in the United States, but there's really nothing on the cards yet. So we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, just help me out. Are there only two major organizations in Mexico, or are there a lot more?
Two
It's
major
kind of like
organizations.
they're. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Two major organizations, and both of those companies they license their talent out to all the independents. So there's probably I'd say there's a good 75 or 80 arenas that run weekly wrestling in Mexico still. But then there's spot shows, there's fundraisers, there's all that. So any given day, there's probably 30 or 40 wrestling shows across the country somewhere.
Yeah. Like here, there's kind of a circuit there. What would be a typical week for you if you're booked kind of full time there? How's the travel and everything?
When I was with CMLL, it was pretty damn brutal, but it was just what you want. Mondays we would have Puebla, which would be a 2-hour bus ride from Mexico City. So you leave at 4 p.m., wrestle back.
Now these bus drives are they the company buses? Or are they public buses you got to, or which
company
one?
bus? Company bus we were all on, the tour bus. We would leave from Arena Mexico. So that was like base. That's headquarters. That's Titan Towers in Mexico City. So 4 p.m. we would leave on Monday, get back at about 2 a.m. on Monday night. Then Tuesday morning is Guadalajara. So you have to leave at 10 a.m., which is an 8-hour bus ride.
Wow.
You get there and you usually get some food.
Now the 8-hour bus ride, obviously you stop along for catering or how's that?
Yeah, you stop along. There's a couple stops, but the company didn't pay for that. That was all. You could either bring your own food or just eat along the way. And then you do a show that started at 9 p.m. in Guadalajara, and then you take the bus back to home the next day.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
How long were the shows? This started at 9 p.m. What were you typically walking out of the ring?
About 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours strict. But the top level guys, like obviously, I was in this position. I was paid well to be there, but I didn't get the amenities like an Atlantis or Ultimo Dragon or Ultimo Guerrero would or Mystico. These guys, as they're covering, they're flying all these places, getting it taken care of. But most of the actual higher end guys, they were all on the bus with me. It was just what you did. And then we'd get home at about 7 or 8 a.m. on Wednesdays. And me personally, and I'd say 90% of the guys on the bus, we would have to be back at Ultimo Guerrero's class to do the lucha training at noon. Wow. So you went in there feeling like absolute hell, but you had to deliver. If you don't deliver, you might not get booked next week. Oh. Wednesday evenings was the CMLL Informa, which was like a press conference, and sometimes they need you for that to be there. And then Thursdays was the only off day. Friday night was Arena Mexico, which was the big show. That was the A show. Saturday was Arena Coliseo, which is the smaller arena in Mexico City, which is actually much cooler than Arena Mexico, in my opinion. And then Sunday would have another Arena Mexico match. So there was matches 6 days a week. And there was the Tuesday night while Guadalajara happens, sometimes there's another Arena Mexico show that you could be booked on. If you're usually not on one, you're on the other. So that 8-hour bus ride would say at least 50% of the time. Wow. But when I was busy with Blue Panther and Negro Casas, I was on at least 4 of those a week, most of the times 5.
Wow.
Your TVs were filmed out of what arena? Most of your TVs?
Arena Mexico.
Arena Mexico. Is it national? Is it like a national network that carry you guys, or how does that work?
It goes up and down all the time. So when I was there, we were on some I want to say it was TV Azteca. But then there's Univision. It's like the licensing agreements. Same with the USA or with the, over here now, all the streaming networks. They might license something for 2 years. Same way down there. It could show up on this, it's always bouncing around. I honestly don't even know what AAA TV is right now. But, it could be different next month.
Sam, were you with me when we came back from, I can't remember where it was. We stopped and got those roadside tacos that were $1 each.
I was not, but I've had many $1 roadside tacos.
I forgot who it was. He wanted to stop, and I was so mad because I wanted to get back to the hotel, and I thought, man, I don't want to stop. We stopped. The tacos were like $1 each. They were the best, the best food I've had. I don't know how in
It's
years.
insane.
It was so freaking. I was so happy we stopped. When he goes, "Hey, we're gonna stop and get some food." I go, "Oh my god, we'll never get back to the hotel." We stopped, and the tacos were like $1 each, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely it's amazing. Just being down there every time I'm in Mexico, it's amazing the different foods they have in different regions. Everywhere you go, there's some dish that they don't have somewhere else, and it's definitely an incredible culture all around. And lucha is part of everybody. That's the beautiful thing is lucha is in everybody's blood and soul. They all have some sentimental attachment to lucha, so that's why it brings everybody from all walks of life. And I think in my opinion, and I'm obviously very proud of this, living in Mexico and getting the lucha experience, I think I have a very authentic experience of Mexico. That I can relate to the people. The people know me because I know what their grandmas eat. I know what what we're gonna do in this town. And it's funny because as soon as I start speaking my Spanish, a lot of people they call it barrio Spanish. It's like the hood Spanish because these are the wrestlers I'm around. These are the people that I picked it up from, and it's kind of like a tongue in cheek, like, oh, this guy knows this is one of our people because it's just how I am and how I picked it up, and I'm so fluent in it. I can't tell. I think I sound eloquent, but apparently, to most Mexicans, they know I'm around a rough crowd.
When I flew down
Guy,
there, when I flew down to Guadalajara, I was flying down. I was bored, on the flight, and I had my Wi-Fi stuff. So I look up Guadalajara, and there's like all these travel warnings. Basically, it said "Do not go." It literally, it said "Do not go." And I'm sitting there looking at it, and so I'm starting to get like on the plane. I'm starting to think, maybe this is a bad idea. So I mean, everything on the internet was "Do not go." It's unsafe. All this stuff. So anyway, we land there, and you know what's going to be the end of the story. I get in the cab with somebody a driver picked me up. They had a driver for me, not a cab. And so we're driving through there, and it's just like driving through here in Maryland. It's safe as it can be. Everything's fine. I said, "Is there any danger around here?" He goes, "Oh yeah. If you go to the bad areas, just like you." And I'm going, "Okay, never mind."
Yep. It's been that way. To this day, people say, "Oh my God, you lived in Mexico City for 2 years." So much misconception. There's areas of that city that's just like Manhattan. It's a beautiful place, beautiful people. The funny thing is, a lot of the wrestlers do come from those bad areas. And it's kind of when you're in lucha, you get to be a part of that. You might have to go to these bad areas or be in the danger zones, but there's such a respect for wrestling, and people are they're excited to have the wrestlers in town. Most of the bad guys watch wrestling. Their kids watch wrestling. I've been in some pretty terrible places with some shady people, and they just appreciate the fact that you're there, that you're not afraid, that you treat them like a human being, and everybody gets along just fine. So there's been some stuff that I'm pretty sure I've met some pretty unsavory people, but I think it's like the same could be said all across the world. There's so much more good than there is bad,
exactly.
but we only tend to talk about the bad stuff.
When we're in South Africa, remember, John, they don't go to Soweto, don't go over here, you'll get
Right.
shot, man. It's the same way all over the world that they got those, Yeah, that's something I'd like to ask here. You're down there and you've experienced this. Back in my day, Mil Mascaras and Dos Carlos, I was fortunate enough to be on card with both those guys and witness their work and everything. They lived, breathed, and ate that gimmick, their Mac, and they wore that thing 24/7. Is that like a tradition in Mexico, or is that a lost thing? What is it?
That's a lost thing. That's a lost art. It's kind of like a running joke now that it's like the guys laugh.
It was back then too. It was back then too.
Yeah.
It was.
I'd be in the car with Mil Mascara. Said, "Mil, take off your mask. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing but swamps and alligators and rattlesnakes out here." No, amigo. No, amigo.
It's in Mexico. There's a few of the top guys, the legends, still abide by it, and it gives them such an incredible sense of aura. It's so much different because there's certain guys like Rayo de Jalisco. Nobody knows what he looks like. La Parca still shows up to the building. I mean, at CMLL, some guys would walk across the street. They'll tuck behind a corner, put the mask on, and come back in the arena. And it was like, some guys now they get to the airport and they'll tell the promoter, okay, I'll be ready an hour later, and go to find somewhere so he can hide and get the mask on. I think it's kind of cool. I think it gave these guys a little bit more of a mystique to them, because to this day, these are the guys that are drawing bigger money. They're the guys that people, are excited to meet, because that mystery is still there. Canek and Dos Caras still do it. They're very seldomly seen anywhere around anybody without the masks. So I don't know. It's not a tradition anymore. I think it would be, from my perspective, I think it could be cool. I think there's a lot more good that it could provide. But, we're in a modern media age. I don't think there's really any going back to that.
I think it's pretty cool also when you see these guys come in their very nice suits and their mask on. It's such a cool
Beautiful.
look. When the guys walk in, and nearly all of them, got those big barrel chests, big, well-built guys in nice suits, and they got that nice mask on, and they're walking in. That's a really cool look.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I love it. I think it's so eloquent. There's so much art behind it too. There's a lot of, on Instagram, there's people that just specialize in taking pictures of wrestlers in masks and suits. So they'll be all over, just taking these beautiful images in front of a water fountain or something like that with some wrestler posing. It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. Well, Sam, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you coming on, and I've been appreciated seeing you down in Mexico. We've been down there working together, and it's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate the invitation. I'm always down to talk about a little wrestling with you. So I'm glad you guys had me. Mr. Brisco, it's a pleasure. If you guys ever need anything from me, you know where to find me.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you for your time.